Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In Podcast. This Saturday is UFC Vegas 13. We got the return of Thiago Santos versus Glover Teixeira. Some high-ranked light heavyweights with possibility of a number one contender status awaiting the winner. But man, can't skip over last week because we were over 10 units positive. I think we hit every single bet that we sent out there for you guys in terms of free plays. And just to recap them real quick.
Yeah, our first one, Miles Johns versus Kevin and TV Dad. Shout out to our fan, Todd Lally, who said that we were morons and should go back to watching cartoons. Because of that, we played him straight, so appreciate the money right there.
Absolutely. The next one, man, was Dustin Jacoby, and I know that was your dog pick of the night there with Justin Ledet, and he did land his fair share of good shots, but they were just right there on the end. He couldn't seem to find his distance very well. He didn't use or even threaten to take down the grappling whatsoever. Kind of just tried to out-kickbox a guy who's been kickboxing forever.
Should really consider moving back up to heavyweight, and even then, I think that people have found his weakness as far as being heavy on that front foot. Just throw a couple leg kicks, and Ledet's going to have some problems. Moving on, Jason Witt versus Cole Williams. Big shout out to Jason Witt. I think that he really solidified him being a UFC prospect worthy. And Williams, man, really disappointing that he missed weight in his second, chance in the UFC.
Right, and that was probably one of our best post-weigh-in reads right there. After we saw how bad Cole Williams looked on the scale, we stormed that Witt money line, and we almost played not going the distance as well. Next fight there was Sean Strickland, and we almost pulled the trigger on that one, not seeing the judges, and glad we held off on that one because, in my opinion, I text you, Sean wasn't. Not that he wasn't hungry for a finish, but I think after that 2-year layoff, he wanted some octagon time. He wasn't in a rush to get the finish.
And almost a perfect opponent to take as much punishment as possible without getting finished. And Jack Marshman. Moving on, Adrian Yanez called the TKO. He looked flawless. I say flawless. He did kind of expose himself and allow Victor Rodriguez to kind of get off some shots, but I don't think he was ever in danger.
No, he really wasn't respecting Rodriguez too much. He was definitely willing to take on to land his fair share of shots because basically every shot he was landing was putting down. The next one was your prelim main event, and talk about flawless performance, man. Alexander the Great Hernandez just went out there and steamrolled Chris Gruetzemacher. I know that's another bet that we cashed on somehow inside the distance at plus money. I know we almost took the TKO, but after Gruetzemacher had been subbed, we just didn't want to take the chance of the sub there. But anyway, plus money, I think plus 165, and he made it look stupid easy.
Yeah, that was one of the easier bets of our night. Thiago Moises versus Bobby Green. It was a dirty fight. I honestly, I picked Thiago Moises to win, but I didn't expect him to win by decision over Bobby Green. That's for sure.
Yeah, I was all over the Bobby Green by decision, and I necessarily wasn't. I wasn't pissed about the decision. It was a super close fight. Moises actually broke the streak now. Favorites are 24-1 in the last two cards. Moises is the only underdog in the last two cards that have won. Moving on, we had Kevin Holland fighting the newcomer and Charlie Antiveros, and pretty scary for a little bit. You didn't really know what happened, but it seems like maybe just something will pop in the neck. Wasn't as serious as it needed to be. Kevin Holland, seemed to find his career right now. I hope he actually gets a willing opponent makes it to the fight next time.
Yeah, totally agree. I was also worried about Charlie Ontiveros after that fight, but after seeing him as he posted a picture, I was like, okay, thank the Lord, he's so good. Greg Hardy versus Maurice Green. Hardy looked really good. I think that, it's really showing that he's, becoming comfortable inside the octagon, and he's not blowing his wad searching for the finish. Because in the first round, he had Maurice Green hurt, but he laid off a little bit and just let his experience kind of shine as far as him being, still a relatively new fighter to the UFC cage.
Yeah, I think Greg Hardy's got a massive ceiling, a bunch of unreached potential that he's yet to tap into.
And just one of the biggest, most athletic dudes in the heavyweight division, so it's going to be hard to stop, technique-wise or not. It's going to be a tough one to beat.
The co-main event was our boy, Bryce Mitchell, man. Not a flawless performance. He caught the knee, but in my opinion, he outstruck the striker. He landed his fair share of right hands. It is a little bit of a wrestler overhand, but when your takedown's that good, man, it opens up your striking so much, and I think that's what we're seeing with Bryce.
Yeah, over 10 minutes of control time, I couldn't have asked for more Bryce Mitchell, especially against that level of competition and Andre Feely. So, Doug Nasty.
Only up from there for Bryce, man. So I'm really, really curious to see who he gets next.
And then Hall versus Silva. And we took that haul inside the distance at like plus 177 or something. And, at first, exactly what we expected. Hall's a slow starter and eventually started to pick up the pace. And it was, man, I really hope it's the last time we see Silva in the UFC octagon. Maybe he could go to Bellator and find some success.
I'm with you, man. I hope that's the last time we see him, too. Especially, the number 9 middleweight in the world. It's somebody Anderson really shouldn't be fighting at his age.
Right.
Before we go into the main event, man, make sure to like the video here and subscribe to the channel. We're single-digit subscribers away here. One of you guys getting a poster back here. It's signed by Robbie Lawler and Matt Brown, but hell of a fight night, man. On top of the ones you can see here. Not listed in the pictures, man. Just a few of them. I know we got Gilbert Burns on there.
Jorge Masvidal.
Joanna and Jacek's on here, on top of the Clay Guida and Anthony Johnson and stuff, man. There's
some that we didn't even realize before we put up the poster.
Yeah.
We started looking, we went back through the fight card and saw that we actually had some signatures that were pretty cool.
Yeah, I do believe Dustin Poirier on there or something. There's some really good names on there.
Just look up the fight card. They're all there. It's impressive.
Yeah, a lot of these guys, Jorge's got a belt. You've got Gilbert Burns fighting for
Brian Ortega.
That's another one on there.
That one's awesome.
Yeah, man, a bunch of these guys are on their way up. And now it'd be nice to have a signed poster.
Yeah.
So I think we're only like 7 subscribers away. So let us know in the comments who you guys got in the main event this week. Throw you in the running.
Mm-hmm.
So without further ado, man, let's get into it.
All right, so we start off with actually a really good fight at welterweight. Max Payne Griffin, who is 15-8, is fighting Ramiz Brahimaj, who is only 8-2. Max Griffin is 2-5 in his last 7. Recently, he just hasn't lived up to his potential, and I think that he actually does have a relatively high ceiling. He's 34 years old. I do think that he can make an impact on this welterweight division. There's just some things that he needs to fine tune. He, in his losses, they're not people that he should be losing to. It's Alex Oliveira, Alex Morano, Thiago Alves, Curtis Millender. Now Thiago Santos, I can live with that. But even his 2 wins, they're against Zalim Ahmadiyov, who's 0-3 in the UFC and is out of it, I'm pretty sure. And then Mike Perry, who's somewhat one-dimensional and a person that I expect him to be. Max Payne Griffin, so he is training with Fluffy Hernandez and did his camp at Team Alpha Male, which I think is really going to help him out. I know that earlier in the year, I saw in an MMA Junkie interview that Griffin had hurt his hamstring and had to switch to southpaw for the majority of his time training. And he says that switching to southpaw finally made him understand angles and that he's going to be much more patient in his fights. He kind of compared it to instead of a quarterback getting the snap and immediately making a throw, sitting inside the pocket and looking at the different options before he actually attacks. So I think we're going to see a much more composed Max Griffin in there, and I'm excited to see him, hopefully gain some steam in the welterweight division. One other thing is, this guy Brahimaj, he's 8-2 with all 8 of his wins by submission, so he's going to try and get it to the ground. That's something Max Griffin, he has some good takedown defense, some good balance, and he's relatively big for the welterweight division, so it's going to be a tough guy to get to the ground. Now, one thing that I do worry about with Brahimaj is that he trains at Fortis MMA, who we've seen put out some really good prospects recently. So I got to imagine that he's really sharpening those tools. Brahimaj, he's in the past year, he's had to lay off because of a couple of things. I know he got COVID in his last time he was scheduled to fight, and then right before that, they found out that he had a tumor behind his eye and had to do surgery, and he did no contact training for over 6 months. So I know that he's eager to get back in here. I just don't think that it's going to be a good outing for him against somebody like Max Griffin, who has been on a bad streak so far, but I think has all the potential to make this a relatively easy fight.
Yeah, so I'm right there with you, man. I think Max Griffin is going to take this one. He touched on that record recently. He's a 9-fight UFC vet, 3-6 in those fights. I don't want to say that this is an absolute gimme fight for Max Griffin, but I do think that the UFC placed him in a fight here with a little bit lower level competition guy that is definitely favored against. You got Max Griffin, who's going to have a little bit of size advantage on the guy, the experience advantage, the reach advantage, and overall just a massive athletic advantage, in my opinion. And you just touched on his grappling. Super underrated. And I don't think Ramiz is going to come out here and steamroll Max Griffin by no means. Ramiz, you talked about him, and he hasn't fought since March of 2019. He's 2-2 in his last 4 fights there in LFA. He's been to the judges' scorecards twice, and he's lost both of them. And Max Griffin has been to the judges' scorecard of his last 7 fights. So I know Max Griffin has got the gas tank to stay for 15 minutes. Where you don't know that for Brahimaj on the other end. He's got the 100% finish rate. I think he's only been out of the first round maybe 3 times, losing 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the gas tank is not proven. The layoff as well. I don't expect Ramiz to come in here with the gas tank that's going to be able to keep up with Max Griffin. Outside the first round, I really do give this fight to Max. I think he might have to withstand, some grappling heavy attacks, especially in the first round there. He might have to get off the mat a couple times. But I like him to stop the takedown eventually and start to piece him up. Maybe he might, like I said, might give up that first round, but I really do like Max Griffin to win the last 2 on the feet. And I know there's a Max Griffin by decision line that we really like here.
Yeah, and not to mention, Griffin, he had opened up at a -195. Since then, that line's moved to a -142. So, man, I hope other people are thinking Brahimaj is going to win, because as low as that Max Griffin line can get, I want that straight bet too.
Yeah, so I'm completely all good with the Max Griffin money line. I would suggest that, and I think it's like a +150 by decision or something for Max. And going to the judges' scorecard in his last 7, man, I don't mind that one bit at all.
Not me either.
Moving on to the next fight of the night in the featherweight division, we have Darren Elkins, who's 24-9, fighting Eduardo Garagorri, who's 13-1. Darren Elkins, man, at one time found himself in like a 6-fight win streak in the featherweight division and kind of gaining some steam. I guess you could say a lot of those wins were come from behind wins, but 6-fight win streak in a row, and now he's sporting the L4. So, complete kind of different point in his career for the 36-year-old. He's got the losses to Volkanovski, Lamas, I think Ryan Hall, and then his last one coming up, against Nate Landwehr, who we're big fans of there. But, man, Darren Elkins is an absolute vet, been in the UFC for almost 10 years now and fought the who's who of the featherweight division. And another fight that I don't want to say is a gimme fight, but I almost think they're giving Elkins somebody that really plays into his style of fight. Stylistically, I think this is a really good fight for Darren Elkins. I think he's got a massive, massive wrestling advantage here. And we saw Eduardo in his UFC debut. He got the co-main event spot as a UFC newcomer there. And Berto Bandone, I think was who it was, took him down quite a few times. And I'm sorry, but man, that's nowhere near the level of grappling that Darren Elkins is going to present to you. That being said, Eduardo, he throws power in all his shots, and he's got a really, really sneaky head kick that he does sneak in there on people. And, as he's getting older, Darren Elkins, he shows the damage. He lives up to the nickname. There's not a fight I don't think we've seen in the last 10 that he's not showing he's bleeding in some way, The chin has started to let him down a little bit. And if Garagorri, lands a good shot, I can see it testing that man. But I really do think if Darren Elkins fights this one, smart fight, I think he can dominate on the mat. If he doesn't get the sub, I like him to kind of just land the guard and just kind of coast it out for an easy win. Try to not take some damage this time.
Yeah, so I think you touched on age. I think that's going to be a common factor in a lot of these fights that we mentioned moving forward. At 36 years old in the featherweight division, that's not doing anybody favors. And then him coming off a 4-fight losing streak, it just doesn't look like there's a light at the end of the tunnel for Darren Elkins as far as his future in the UFC. Volkanovski, Ricardo Lamas, Ryan Hall losses, those aren't ones to hang your head about. But when you're losing to Nate Landwehr, who we're huge fans of, and if you guys haven't seen that fight, that's something I really suggest you guys checking out, because that is an absolute classic. But the Landwehr fight, he's not upper echelon competition that you should be losing to, especially being a 24-fight veteran in the UFC. That's not somebody that you can be losing to at 36 years old. So he does live up to his name as the damage, and I feel like his ability to get it to the ground has worked for him until fighters started adjusting their games to combat somebody who's almost one-dimensional like Darren Elkins is. You touched on Garagorri kind of being the perfect matchup for Elkins, as far as, Elkins will be able to get the takedown and probably point him to a decision. So yeah, and kind of outpoint him to a decision. One cool thing about this fight is this is Elkins' first time being a favorite in over 9 fights, and I just don't think that he's a person that I want to lean on as far as getting an easy fight done, because he's never been in an easy fight in his UFC career. He, a couple of good things about Darren Elkins, if it's not about his wrestling, is he does have a good pumping double jab, and he does have an overhand right like every wrestler we've ever seen. Moving to Eduardo, he's 1-1 in the UFC, with his loss coming to Ricardo Ramos, who was coming into that fight as a -350, and it's a fight that I think everybody expected Eduardo to lose. So it's not something that I'm really, holding a lot of weight as far as how I'm judging Garagorri. Now, you talked about Humberto Bandone, who is only 1-3 in the UFC, being able to take him down quite a bit. That is true, but at the same time, Garagorri was able to get back up to his feet and outpoint him to a decision win. I'm not saying that Bandone's wrestling is on the same level as Elkins, but Eduardo was able to, kind of address those takedowns and still get the job done. I would hope that he's addressing that in his camp. Although, realistically, Eduardo is a counter striker. He wants to stay on his feet, and he throws really low hook shots, which you would think would benefit him in stuffing a takedown, but we just haven't seen it. Right. So there are a couple of unknowns as far as Eduardo's ability to stop the takedown. It's just one of those fights where Elkins being a 2-1 favorite against anybody in featherweight is suspect to me.
It is, man. You touched on him being a dog in the previous 9. Like, Elkins has not done anything, especially being on an L4, to deserve a more 2-1 price tag for him. So it's not a fight that I personally have anything put on at this point in time. It could be a toss-up. I definitely see the path. I see a more clear path, I think, for Darren Elkins. But I don't trust Darren Elkins.
No, I totally agree. So next fight, I think it's one that both of us are really looking forward to. We've got Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who's 17-6, versus Alexander King Kong Romanov, who's 12-0. Romanov is one of the most exciting fighters to come into the UFC in the past year. He's got all of his wins by finish, 4 by KO and 8 by submission, and he relies on pure power and strength to get the fight where he wants it. And where he wants it is on the ground. He will shoot the double leg, single leg, just body lock and suplex you like we saw in the Roque Martinez fight to get the fight to the mat. He's a southpaw. He goes for the takedown early. My only knock on Romanov is that he does show cardio issues. I've seen it in the regional scene and in his UFC fights whenever he was fighting Roque Martinez. You could hear... you could almost not hear Romanov's breathing because Roque Martinez was breathing so heavy. But Romanov started to slow down as that fight progressed, and I do worry that if Romanov isn't able to, the finish early in the first 2 rounds, that we could see him suffer from cardio issues. Now, that's not saying that De Lima's coming in here with like an awesome gas tank or anything, but De Lima definitely has the experience advantage, especially in the UFC. He's 6-4 in the UFC, and he's coming off the round 1 KO of Benzasoli, which is the first time Benzasoli had ever been finished. It's no doubt that De Lima really brings some power in his hands, and I know he trains at American Top Team Coconut Creek, and actually has trouble finding training partners. There are not a lot of people that want to spar with him because of his power, and I really do think that he offers some problems on the feet. I just don't think that it's going to come into play here. De Lima only has a 36% takedown defense, and I can't imagine it going any different from the absolute brute that Romanov is.
I'm with you on that, man, and I think we had talked about we got Romanov in a parlay with somebody later on the card that we'll get to, a bet that we're pretty confident on, So just to touch on Rogerio de Lima a little bit, man. You had touched on him. He's been in the UFC since 2014. Only his last 3 fights, though, being at heavyweight. So, the previous, 7 there being, at a light heavyweight weight. So, the speed definitely carries up to heavyweight there, as his hands are a lot faster. But
3-1 at heavyweight.
The power is there too. You know, he definitely has the power to put heavyweights away. My only knock on him, man, is the 4 UFC losses are all by sub. And it's against a guy who I think is going to have a pretty easy time getting this to the mat. It's an absolute natural heavyweight who probably has to cut some kind of weight in order to get down there. You touched on the cardio issues because I have that written down, man. The only way Lima wins this fight is he weathers the storm early, and he probably gives up a 10-8 round, either the first or second, and happens to pull something out in the third round. That being said, there's been nothing to show me that he's going to have the cardio to be able to, withstand that amount of damage, and he's only shown me that he can be put out. He's alternated wins and losses in the UFC, so if you do believe in superstition a little bit, he's the due for a loss here. So I do like that. So to talk about our boy, man, I truly think this is one of the better prospects the UFC has to date right now between him and Cyril Gane. I think that's the best two heavyweight prospects that there are. I really have high hopes for Romanov. I think the guy has a really big ceiling. And at 29, he's just getting into his prime, man. That being said, outside the UFC, he really wasn't fighting the best at competition, but what he was doing to that level of competition is exactly what you want to see in a nice prospect. He's 100% finish rate majority of the time in the first round,
A couple more things to note. Romanov's foundation style is sumo, and I thought that was pretty cool.
That's absolutely what it's like a grizzly bear.
It's insane.
He just wants to get his hands on you, and he can literally drag you down to the mat in thousands of different ways. I'm super confident on Romanov here. The first time that they fought, it was almost a pick 'em. And after how successful he was in that Roque Martinez fight, we're now getting us more than 3-1 favorite. So I don't like that, but I definitely find value in parlaying Romanov here and dropping a couple units on it.
One more thing to touch on to Lima. One thing that he was actually able to implement in that Ben Sicily fight was an inside leg kick that really disrupted the attack of Ben Sicily. And Alexander Romanov is also a southpaw, so I could see that coming into play if Romanov isn't able to get it to the ground, which we think he is, but let's say he isn't. The inside leg kick and big overhand right from Lima are the only paths to victory that I see him getting. He's not going to be able to stop the takedown. He's not going to win on the mat. But if he is able to get it in his later rounds, look for the inside leg kick to be the one that gets it done.
Yeah, and I don't want to knock Sicily loss or anything, but from what I know about Sicily, he's not 6'2" or anything. I'm pretty sure he's
got the same build as Romanov, just smaller.
Just giving up a ton of size against Lima. That's not the case, man. Romanov's going to be a much bigger guy, and it just plays into his style of fight. So I love Romanov in this one, man. And moving on, we got some nice prospects again here in Trevin Giles, who's 12-2, fighting Bevon Lewis, who's 7-2. This is taking weight in the middleweight division. Both of these are two young prospects who, in my opinion, neither one of them is their prime yet, being at 28 and 29 and, less than 15 fights on their resume. I don't think we've seen the best form of either one of these two guys. That being said, man, Trevin Giles currently, he's lost 2 of his last 3, in my opinion. Should be on the L3, man. I think that was in Houston, actually, where they were watching Jones when Prowse stepped up on 2 days' notice and took that fight, and 2 days' notice up a weight class, and the whole first round he had Trevin Giles back, and it's not the first time we've seen that. Trevin Giles, he does have a win over Ryan Spann in LFA, but the entire first round, Spann has his back until like the last minute. Devin explodes and turns around into his guard. I think he relies on his really wrestling heavy attack, but when it comes to the terms of jiu-jitsu, he really lacks a lot of the skills. He's just really a hard-nosed wrestler, but he's like a full-time police officer as well, and he's had the passing out backstage, what he said it was heart issues. I don't know what kind of Trevin Giles we're going to see in this fight. I don't know if it's a fully prepared on the other side. You've got Bevon Lewis. In my opinion, I think Bevon Lewis is the more complete fighter of the two, but I don't think his wrestling skills are on the level of Trevin Giles just yet. Being said, he's going to have like a 5-inch reach advantage, 3-inch height advantage. He's trained with your boy John Jones. He made his debut against Uriah Hall, so the UFC has high hopes for this guy, Bevon Lewis. At a 7-2 record, I just think he's very, very green. It's hard for me to put my money on him. Maybe in a Hail Mary parlay that we had looked at. But I'm curious to see how these two prospects match up with each other. I'm curious to see how the grappling's going to hold up for Bevon Lewis because I think he's much better on the feet. And I know he'll talk about some of those skills.
Yeah, so one thing to note about this fight is I don't think it's going to be a slugfest.
Right.
I think it'll be a somewhat to the casual fan. It's not going to be the best fight ever. But Trevin Giles, this is his first time ever coming into a fight as an underdog in his professional career. And I think that kind of speaks to the level of competition he's seen so far in the UFC. The win over James Krause, definitely controversial. Right. And that was Krause on 24 hours notice. And it seemed like they both had the same gas tank. And that's something that I really don't see out of Bevon Lewis being a problem. He has a solid gas tank. And, something that I kind of noted is his stand-up is somewhat comparable to Neil Magny's, where it's like extremely awkward and he can kind of frustrate his opponent. He's either all the way in with like dirty boxing in the clinch and dirty knees in the clinch, or he's all the way out where he can touch you, but you just can't get to him. Another thing is Trevin Giles. He doesn't have good takedown defense, and I don't think Bevon Lewis is going to be the one to take him down. But it is something to note that if it does get dirty and in the clinch, Bevon Lewis has the ability to bring the fight to the mat if he wants to. Because, like you touched, Trevin Giles has in the past had problems with anybody with even decent jiu-jitsu. Zach Cummings and Gerald Meerschaert both guillotined him in round 3, and I think that speaks to Giles' gas tank issues. Mm-hmm. Giles, as far as his stand-up, he has a great snapping jab that he leads with, and then he looks for a straight right to follow right behind it once he figures out the distance. And, when we do see those gas tank issues, he throws all of his technique out the window and just winds up with his punches and really telegraphs all of his shots. So I think that even though Bevon Lewis has like half the amount of fights, he does seem to be the more polished fighter. Mm-hmm. And at a minus 107, it might not be one that we're both comfortable playing straight, but I think that there is value just on Bevon Lewis straight up. I think that he's the better fighter, and we'll see him outpoint Trevin Giles to a decision win. Although I think it's going to be a lackluster fight overall.
Yeah, so I'm right there with you, man. I think just the overall striking pedigree and stuff for Bevon Lewis will it's going to show in this fight here, especially if Giles can't get this fight to the mat. Both still being green, in my opinion. Bevon Lewis definitely having a higher ceiling, being the more polished of the two, and it is almost a 50-50 chance, in my opinion, and at odds like that, almost don't mind a 1 year or something with Bevon Lewis.
Right. So now we move on to the guy that I've been looking to fade his entire UFC career, but this is not a fight to try and fade. Giga Chikadze, who is 11-2, versus the newcomer Jamey Simmons, not really sure. I'll just call him Jamey, but who's only 7-2. Giga, he's undefeated since he lost to Austin Springer on the Dana White's Tuesday Night Competitive Series, and he's on a 6-fight win streak right now. Between his wins over Brandon Davis, Jamal Emmers, and Omar Morales, he's really put together a decent resume, especially in since 2019, entering the UFC. The decision win against Omar Morales, he proved me wrong. I thought Omar Morales was going to be able to close that distance, where Giga had him chasing him for the entire fight, and it was relatively impressive. He kept it at the distance that he wanted, and he earned some points in my book. So I'm not a fan of Giga by any means right now, but I do think that he offers more problems than I actually saw him in his previous fight. So one thing to note is Giga. One thing you always note about Giga is that he's a glory kickboxer. That's where he wants to keep the fight. He has flashy kicks, and all of his strikes are done at distance. In his UFC career, he hasn't had any KOs, but I think the UFC is setting him up for one right here. If there was going to be a knockout of the night, or if we could bank on a knockout of the night, I think that this is the fight that it's going to come out of. Because Jamey Simmons, he's like 4 to 5 inches shorter than Giga. He's 7-2. He just doesn't have much to bring to the table, especially as far as experience comes. And his last 2 fights, they combined for 1 minute and 36 seconds, and that's already on a pretty subpar record,
Right.
you know? So I do think some good things, I guess, about Jamey is that he's powerful for his size, and he's going to have to look to try and pressure Giga up against the cage and make this a dirty fight, which is everybody's game plan against Giga. It's just if you can implement it. I don't think he's going to be able to.
So I'm right there with you, man. You know, Giga is he's one of those guys, like you said, we're always looking for a spot to fade him. And in my opinion, this is, yet again, not another spot for us to do that. He's got great size at 6 foot for featherweight division, and he's 4-0 UFC division, and this will be his third fight of 2020. And, you know, between the 3 fights now in 2020 and his canceled bouts, I feel like we've talked about Giga more than any fighter since starting the podcast and stuff, so maybe we're just getting a little tired of him there. But you're right, man. We have not seen anybody since Austin Springer be able to implement the game plan to take him down and try to choke him out. In that Omar fight, I know I couldn't convince you on it, and I think we ended up playing under 2.5. But Giga's actually the biggest dog that I've cashed in. I think this year, like a plus 125, something like that. I thought Omar really was the opponent that was going to bring Giga's kickboxing style out. You know, Giga just needed somebody that was going to pressure him and be in his face to show Giga, you know, to bring out the striking, exciting style that Giga brings. And I think we got to see that. You know, Giga went out there and he was the calf kicker to Omar, you know, and landed plenty of good right hands. And then getting a complete step down in competition here. Maybe just wanting the quick turnaround, or maybe it's just a slow build-up that they're doing with Giga. I don't really know, but he stays putting in the work. You know, he's been one of the more active fighters since entering the UFC. He's one of those that I follow on social media. Even if he's in the United States or back home, the guy's constantly in the gym working. Standing across the octagon from him and Jamey, man, he's fought at 135, 145, and 155, all in a matter of 8 fights. He can't seem to find his weight class, and at 5'5", 5'6", I think the home was 135. You know, so the fact that he's fighting at 145 and 155 makes me think that just doesn't carry the weight too well. And he is a good wrestler, don't get me wrong. He's going to be giving up some serious size advantage. I don't find him. You know, his game plan is without a doubt going to be clinching up against the fence and trying to drag Giga down, but I just don't see it, man. It's a very wide line, but I wouldn't mind. Especially, I really want to see him weigh in. You know, I want to see these guys face off before I take a stab on this fight. But Giga TKO props probably something pretty interesting because, you know, Jamey he's got 2 losses, but one of those he was KO'd stiff by a knee up the middle while he was shooting for a takedown, and I mean, that's somebody with half the level of pedigree there that Giga's got. So I think Giga's going to make some reads on this fight. And like you said, man, I think I like him to get his first UFC finish here.
Yeah, and I got to imagine that his ability to stop the takedown is coming from him training at King's MMA with Neil Darush and RDA.
Yeah.
Those are 2 really good guys to try and test your takedown defense against. And another thing to note is I'm sure that Giga right now is one of the UFC's favorite fighters because he's fighting for under 30,000, even with the bonus,
right.
And why not have a flashy kickboxer headline your prelims right now and get out pretty relatively, easy as far as paying your fighters?
I feel you. So I know we probably both agree. Giga's probably going to take that one pretty easily and might release a TKO prop if the line's right.
I think that's something that we're going to touch on.
To kick off the main card, we got Claudia Gadelha, who's 18-4, versus Xiaonan, who's 12-1, and currently a battle between ranked women's strawweights there. And then in the red corner, you got Claudia Gadelha, who's an 11-fight UFC vet. She's fought for the title, basically fought the who's who of the strawweight division, you know. One of those girls that I might not have seen or had a problem with moving up to 125 as well, as at 115, she does carry the weight a little more than a lot of the other women do. She's on a 2-fight win streak, beating Angela Hill and Carolina. Also, I believe, are the last 2 wins of Jonah Yan there as well, who's 5-0 in the UFC. You know, Claudia's, she's got very good grappling, man, and her takedowns, they're good. They're very nice in the sense that she doesn't take you down and sit in your guard. When Claudia takes you down, she's very good about ending up in a dominant position. So tripping you and ending up in side control and stuff. She's very good at getting the underhooks against the cage and dragging you down to the mat. But she sometimes will get into a brawl and striking exchanges with girls that she shouldn't be doing that with. You know, both these girls are 31 years old, which 31-year-old for Claudia, that almost blew because she's been around for so long, but she's got so many more miles on the body. She wears the 31-year-old. Just like I said, all the UFC fights they've taken their toll on her. I think. Whereas the 31-year-old in Jan is really hitting her prime as of right now. Basically, really, primarily a striker versus grappler fight here. Claudia Gadelha's striking defense is just nothing to really write home about in my opinion. She's very, very hittable, and on standing across the octagon from her is a girl that throws heat and throws heat for the full 15 minutes. She's got a very high output in terms of volume, and it's something that she can keep up for the entire 15 minutes. I think this girl has done more than enough to earn this number 9 spot in the strawweight division, and I really do think, I think she has potential to take the number 5 spot from Claudia if she wins here. Man, she's super strong in the clinch. I wouldn't say anything that she does is super technical by no means, but man, this girl throws hard. I know I've checked her Instagram, been in there with Cejudo training a little bit. She looks to be in great shape. And Claudia really slowed down in that third round against Angela Hill. We're not going to see that for Jan. So, if there is a finish here, I think Jan could probably get like a third round finish, but I'd like Jan to just, basically keep up what she's been doing and for 15 minutes beat up Claudia Gadelha and take a pretty easy win here. And I'd almost pick 'em odds, man. I think it's almost like minus 125, something like that now. That is definitely right at the range that I'm more than willing to drop units on.
Couldn't agree more. Jan, she's really found her stride. She's on a 10-fight win streak right now, 5 of those in the UFC, and all of them by decision. Although she does like getting into slugfest, it's, again, just kind of the part of being in the strawweight division. You just usually don't carry that power. Jan is a volume puncher. She likes to throw all of her punches and combinations, and right now she's in the top eight strikes landed per minute in the entire UFC. So you know that she's going to bring it and really put a stamp on the judges' scorecard with just how much volume. Right. And we saw that in the Angela Hill fight where Hill landed the more significant strikes, but just got outpointed, and that's something that I think we could see in this Gadelha fight. Because like you mentioned, Gadelha averages 3 takedowns per fight, but that being said, she has a problem with getting into stand-up wars with girls that she shouldn't be. Right. And that's what we saw in the Angela Hill fight, and I think Jan's just a very similar striker to Angela, just more volume. Yeah. So I think that Jan would be able to pull this out via decision relatively easily. And as far as Gadelha is concerned, she hasn't won or lost by anything other than decision, other than the Karolina Kowalkiewicz rear naked choke in 2017, since 2013. And that's 11 fights where she's gone to decision, win or lose. So I definitely see this fight going to the judges, and I'm sure the odds would reflect that. But Jan getting it done by decision, I think, is, if I'd like to see what those odds are, because although I do love her, it's just a straight bet here. I think that that's how it's going to happen. I don't see her getting Gadelha out. And that being kind of a testament to Gadelha's durability, That being said, Gadelha isn't just like at a loss when she's on her feet. She does throw some good combos with herself. And, I think it was in the Angela Hill fight where she has a combination where she'll start with an uppercut to left hook to right straight. And it's really, really, it's good. It's a solid combination, and it's something that can catch some girls off guard. I just don't think that it'll be enough to slow down the pace that Jan can bring into this fight. So.
Yeah, at 31 years old, girls, I honestly think it's just 2 different points in their career. I think Claudia's at a point where we're not going to see her add any tools or anything to her arsenal. Maybe not even see her improving or getting better at this point. I think Claudia Gadelha has hit her peak. Where on the other end, I think we're seeing Xiaonan and Jan just get better every single fight.
I couldn't agree more.
Don't mind land a couple units, man, on Jan money line, and I'm with you, man. I think decision's the way she gets it done.
So moving on, we've got Ian the Hurricane Heinisch versus Brendan All-In Allen. Heinisch is 14-3 and Allen is 15-3. That being said, it seems like the experience is far more in Heinisch's corner than it is for Allen. Heinisch is, 8 years older than Allen, and it shows inside the octagon. Allen, he's 3-0 in the UFC, and those wins being to highly touted guys, Kevin Holland, Tom Breeze, and Kyle Falkus, all of which are somewhat small for the middleweight division.
Not cutting.
Right, they're not cutting weight. And, Allen, his only losses are before his entrance into the UFC, but all the guys that he lost to, he was 20 to 22 years old, and every single one of them are currently in the UFC. So he's been high level his entire career, and there's just a couple of things I don't like about Allen. Allen, he finds himself in compromising positions, whether he wins or loses. It's just he has a problem with getting either cut open or put on his back. That being said, he's really good off his back. He's great on the ground. He averages 2 takedowns per fight, and in those 2 takedowns, he averages 4.5 submission attempts. So he's very active on the ground, and that's definitely where he wants to get this fight. That being said, Heinisch, he's a veteran. I say that, and I know he's only had 5 fights in the UFC, but the way that he fights, he's pretty composed in there, and I really do kind of think that Heinisch's takedown defense is something that is going to be in question in this fight. Heinisch is really good at balancing whenever somebody's trying to get it to the ground. And I just don't know if Brendan Allen's a good enough wrestler to get it to the ground. So if Heinisch is able to keep it on the feet, I could really see him start to land, to land that overhand right, or just some of those sneaky strikes that he's been able to implement in his past fights. I know looking on his IG, he's really jumped around for his camp in the last 8 weeks. He's visited places like Extreme Couture, Genesis Fight Team, the UFC Performance Institute, and Factory X Muay Thai, and training with the likes of Nate Marquardt, Neil Magny, and Chris Kamazi. And, this one, every single time I break it down in my head, it just gets closer and closer and closer. I think I still lean towards Brendan Allen to get it done. I just could see the 24-year-old making a mistake against somebody like Heinisch.
Yeah, man. So this is a super, super close fight, one that was very tough for me to break down, and a fight that I was super glad that they did keep together after it fell apart the first time. So Heinisch, man, you touched on, he's got 5 fights in UFC, had success really right off the bat, and they try to give him that step up in competition with Derek Bronson and Omar Akhmedov, and he's lost both of them, and so back down to the level where I think, Ian Heinisch really will sit about the 15 to 20 range of that middleweight division. Something about Ian Heinisch, man, and I know he's coming off the knockout win of Mearshart, but I said it when breaking down that fight. Both of those guys are slow on the feet. Heinisch doesn't really bring a lot of speed to the table and stuff. The overhand right, it does come a little slow, and I think standing across the octagon from the 24-year-old who's 3 inches bigger, got a 5-inch reach, all the physical attributes favor Brendan Allen, and so I think he's got to avoid the big shot. But I think I think he'll be able to beat Heinisch to the punch. And then you talked about it, man. The takedown defense of Ian Heinisch is really suspect. That being said, he's a hard guy to hold down. He is. But Brendan Allen's an absolute grappling wizard, man. And to see what he did to Kevin Holland, that's really a testament to his skills, man. It really is. He's training out of Sanford MMA. That's where Brunson is. So here recently, Sanford MMA has trained, to fight Ian Heinisch. Something you got to take into account there. You had touched on the wins and the losses of Brendan Allen in the UFC and LFA, and Heinisch and LFA as well, man. These 2 guys are one of the more well-groomed, more experienced prospects that the UFC got. I really do think both of these guys were UFC ready when the UFC took them, and a large part of that does come to the hard fights that they had throughout their entire career. But I just have to lean toward the older guy, man, who's not taking as much damage, who, in my opinion, has some more clear path to victory on the mat, and at almost a pick-em odds. Probably just a unit, but I don't mind playing it.
I agree.
Moving on, man. We have Raoni Barcelos, who's 15-1, fighting Khalid Taha, who's 13-2, and Raoni Barcelos taking this on short notice after my boy Jack Shore had to fall out. I'm a big fan of Jack Shore, man, and I really look to see him get back in there, man. But the guy taking the place of him here, Raoni Barcelos, he's a really well-rounded guy, in my opinion. He's got good striking. He's got a good ground game. I feel like Khalid Taha definitely has the power advantage and maybe has the better ability to finish the fight on the feet. But I know there's a lot of question marks around him taking it at 35 years old and on short notice. But In his prime and maybe in a full camp, I think Barcelos is overall the better fighter, just about everywhere. He's going to have a little bit of size advantage, but I think the massive advantage he's going to have is on the mat. And I think he really, really needs to get this fight into the mat. Because if he doesn't, man, Khalid Taha offers a lot of problems on the feet. Boston Salmon is a very, very good boxer and put his lights out in 25 seconds at 236. Man, that was what really kicked off that night of pay-per-view. And he's an average fighter in my book. He's coming off the 1-year USADA suspension. So it's like, on the other side, Barcelos is taking it short notice, but Taha has not had a lot of octagon time as of recently either. So I don't really know which guy I favor here, to be honest, but with all the question marks really with both of them, I like this fight not seeing the judges.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good read on that fight. One thing that I will say is there's no way that Barcelos should be a over 3-1 favorite in this fight. Taking it on short notice is one thing, but I also think that a lot of the odds are coming from his last performance against Said Nurmagomedov, where he was able to get it to the ground multiple times and keep it there. That being said, he only got it to the ground because Said wouldn't quit throwing spinning attacks, and Barcelos was just able to capitalize and just pick him up off of a awkward or lazy spinning back kick. I don't really know what you want to call them, but they just weren't. They were just being thrown at the wrong time, and Barcelos was able to capitalize on it. That being said, I don't think that Taha is going to expose himself enough to where Barcelos is going to be able to land those easy takedowns. I know Taha, he's been training with Mirabek Taisimov and even Nurmagomedov, so I know he's getting those looks inside of this training camp. And, you touched on his speed and power for the bantamweight division. It's pretty incredible, and he's one of the more athletic fighters in the 135 division. So, man, being 3-1 dogs right now, I really do think that the value is all on Taha. It might not be something that we play on the podcast, but there's definite value there.
Yeah, there is without a doubt.
And I really do think that he's just being disrespected as far as the odds go. Even though Taha, got taken down a couple of times in the Bruno Silva fight, he was able to capitalize in the later rounds on lazy takedown attempts from him and ended up getting a sub on Bruno Silva, who I think is a better pure wrestler than Barcelos. Barcelos definitely has the advantage as far as jiu-jitsu, but I could see Taha getting this done, and it's just tough for me not to look at those odds and want to play Taha just because it is closer to maybe Barcelos being a -150 or -160. Nowhere close to what it's sitting at right now.
I'm with you, man, and this might be something to keep an eye on come post-fight weigh-ins there because I think when these two guys square off and people see the size difference Barcelos might have on this guy, they might storm that line and get it even more in your favor there for Khalid Taha. But on the other end, with Raoni taking it at 35 years old on short notice, I don't know if he's going to make weight, and that weight advantage will definitely help him in the takedown and stuff. So I like this fight, not seeing the judges, and I know it's not bad odds on it either.
Right, and Taha, another thing, I would like to wait until weigh-ins because he's coming off of a failed drug test over his fight with Bruno Silva. Mm-hmm. So we don't know if he's going to look like the same just chiseled athletic specimen at 135. So
a year layoff too.
Right. So before we see him in weigh-ins, it's kind of tough to tell you what he's going to look like coming into this fight. But then if odds do shift even more in Taha's favor and looks good in weigh-ins, that's something that I can't lay off. Right. I think that he is a live dog. So,
okay.
Moving on, we go to the co-main event. Andrei the Pitbull Arlovski, who's 29-19, versus Tanner the Bulldozer Boser, who's 19-6-1. This is a really good fight for Tanner Boser, in my opinion. He's an up-and-comer in the UFC. He's 3-1, with his only loss coming to Cyril Gane, which is going to be a future champion.
He's the only person Cyril Gane has not finished.
And I think that speaks volumes to just his durability, one. And then second, he is like a high-level heavyweight. I think that he's going to break into the top 15 after this fight, and deservingly so. One thing to note is in his last two fights, he switched it up a little bit with how he came in physique-wise. He used to weigh in at 250, and in his last two fights, he's weighed in at 235, and has looked slimmer. He's light on his feet, and has really changed his game, in my opinion, and looked like a legitimate prospect at heavyweight. one of his favorite attack is he likes to dip his head down and almost fake the takedown and then come over top with the overhand right. And when he sees that doesn't work, he'll do the exact same thing by faking the takedown. And people are expecting the overhand right to come, and he'll just come up with the left hand. And that's what we saw in the Felipe Lins fight. And it caught Felipe Lins and made him pay. So I really do like Tanner Boser. Just movement-wise, striking-wise, I don't think that Arlovski's going to be able to get the takedown. And to speak more on Arlovski's recent UFC success, since 2016, or lack thereof, since 2016, he's 5-9 in the UFC and 41 years old. It is the heavyweight division, and you can get away with age, but it's starting to.
If they match you up well, you can get away.
Right. And so this one, shout out to MMA by the numbers, but this fight, if Andrei Arlovski lasts more than 10 minutes, he'll have a full hour more fight time than anyone in UFC heavyweight history inside the octagon.
Over 5 hours.
It's gonna take its toll. Yeah. And something that we talked about earlier in the week is that I think at this point Arlovski, he's fighting for the paycheck rather than fighting for the belt. And I think that mentality is what's going to set Tanner Boser apart in this fight. I really do expect Tanner Boser to get this done by TKO, which is sitting really pretty at plus 315 right now, which I think is something that we got to go on.
Yeah, man, so I'm with you. You have the 41-year-old Andrei Arlovski, he's a 50-fight vet, man. He held the UFC belt a while ago, and he holds the most leg kicks in UFC history. And on the other side, man, is Tanner Boser, who also has the footwork and the leg kicks just much better than Andrei Arlovski. And, I almost said that Tanner Boser is like the Andrei Arlovski 2.0, or maybe a much younger Andrei Arlovski, because they fight a lot the same way. They do rely on their footwork and their speed and being a lot lighter than some of those other heavyweights to, for their footwork and stuff to take effect in there. And, man, I don't want to knock the 41-year-old because there's plenty of fights that he's pulled out. I didn't think he was going to win, and he did. But it's just not in the spot where I think that's the case here. I think when you have a guy at 40-something years old and the point he is in his career, you have to have a damn good reason to bet on him. And, after looking at this fight up and down, from side to side, I can't find a reason to put any kind of money on Andrei Arlovski. I think Tanner Boser is better just about everywhere here. You've got Andrei Arlovski, he said 5-9 or something in his last couple of fights, man, and the chin's really kind of let him down as well. When guys with big power crack him, it doesn't tend to go well for him. It's just a difficult spot for Andrei because I don't think, he's got a guy who's not flat-footed like Elkins and stuff. He's not going to be able to bounce around and outpoint him. So do you change your style up and do you brawl like you used to? No, you don't have the chin to do that anymore. So it's just a tricky spot for Andrei because I really find it difficult to find a path to victory for him. It's a smaller cage as well, so man, he's gonna, Tanner Boser's really not gonna have to use even half the move that he normally does to walk Andrei down, to get his hands working. I like him to kind of, to bounce around and pick him apart. Coming off 2 finishes in a row right now, much bigger guys. Tanner Boser has found the groove, man, and I like that TKO prop at a plus 315. That is so hard in a heavyweight fight to not take a stab on when the guy's coming 2 finishes in a row.
Right.
It's just, Tanner's just a much better fighter at this point for me. I got to fade Andrei. I just love the spot that Tanner Boser's in. Boser is a guy that we had talked about parlaying with Romanov, and I'm completely happy with laying the chalk down on that one. I think both of these guys really do have a good path to victory here, and it's not too often that MMA math, it's something that you don't really want to look at, but it's not too often that you get a guy like these two who have a common opponent of Felipe Lins in like the last 2 fights, and it went completely different. And, Andrei was squeaked by with a close decision win, maybe not landed more significant shots, just more volume, the leg kicks and stuff, and then you had Tanner really making pay and put his lights out for like the first time in his career. So I like Tanner Boser in this position here. There's plenty of ways I see him winning this fight. I like the parlay. I like the stab at the TKO, and man, I'd lay 10 units on Boser straight up if possible.
Right.
Kicking off in the night. I'm sorry, we got the evening. It's the number 4 light heavyweight return, Thiago Santos. It's 21-7. Fighting the number 3 ranked light heavyweight Glover Teixeira is 31-7, and Glover kind of making one last run at the belt, man. A 4-fight win streak at 41 years old and got the number 3 by his name. He's looked good in the 4 fights. I mean, there's been moments of danger, don't get me wrong, but he's won the fights, man. He's found a way to come out on top after being in some very dangerous situations. He's very, very heavy on top. He gets you down on the ground. Glover's a hard man to get off you and to get up from. I went back and watched that Anthony Smith fight, and I almost don't know what to think of it, man, because there was the shit with the break-in and stuff at Anthony's house, and Anthony really did just blow his wad. Anthony was like a shell of himself that fight, and man, I don't want to take that away from Glover by no means because that was an excellent win, but I don't really know how much I want to look into that fight. So then you go into the Roberson and Ion Kutelabas, and Glover was honestly within a couple inches of being finished, a couple punches before he pulled it out. Standing across the octagon from him is a guy who's got more power than those guys, I do believe. And it's like the Stefan Struve and Tai Tuivasa. It's like, it's a super clear path to victory. You've got a guy whose chin has let him down against power punchers. You got a guy who's, in the light heavyweight division, off the top of my head, I can't think of a guy that works as hard as Thiago Santos is, man. I don't know how this guy used to make 185. The moment he moved up to 205, I told you for months he was going to get Jones the hardest fight of anybody. Stylistically, the leg kicks, the power. It offered Jones the most problems out of anybody that I saw, and I think Reyes was pretty close, but was Reyes a split decision?
One of them wasn't.
Yeah, so I know that was a split decision across the board, and he did it on both 2 fucked up knees and stuff. So I like Santos, man. Looking at the Instagram, he looks to be in great shape. I'm really only worrying about him coming out here and maybe blowing the wad trying to get the finish, but I haven't seen Santos do that before. He's been real patient in all of them. The Jan Blachowicz fight, he was super patient before he got that finish. He's just got great Muay Thai, man. He's got everything in the making, I think, that plays into how you Glover.
So I definitely hear where you're coming from. My only thing is, Glover Teixeira is 41 years old, and it does seem to be like, his age, his chin, his octagon time, it's starting to catch up to him, and that's why we see him get rocked in almost all of his fights. That being said, he's brought in Alex Pereira to prepare for this fight. I think that's an excellent guy to utilize to try and come up with a game plan to beat Thiago Santos. Not to mention, Thiago Santos has a lot of unknowns coming into this one. I think if it was anybody other than Santos at 36 years old that had tore both of their knees, completely to shreds and literally had to learn to walk again, we'd be really suspect of how he's going to come back. Right, I definitely, and especially with the momentum that Glover Teixeira is bringing into this fight, and Santos coming off of a loss, maybe a 1-year layoff, little over.
It's got to be at least tearing 2 ACLs or something. It's got to be at least a year layoff.
So, a year layoff, literally learned how to walk again. I'm just super suspect because Thiago Santos is no spring chicken at 36 years old, and I really do just have a lot of questions coming into this one. If you, one thing to note about Santos is he has incredible power, and he can carry that power all the way through into the later rounds, and we've seen that in the Jan Blachowicz fight and the Eric Anders fight, right. Both of those round 3 TKOs. So it's not like even if he's tired, he can't still knock you out, and that's something that Glover Teixeira. It's one of these fights. If he is going to win, he's got to be perfect for 5 rounds, and we hear that a lot, and that's really tough to do in light heavyweight and heavyweight. It's one-punch knockout power with anybody in those divisions, and it's something I'm not sure I want to bank on with Glover Teixeira, even though a 2-to-1 odds.
It's live.
Yeah, it's live. It really is live. It's just not one that I want to even. I want to bank on either way.
One of those of if they're older than 40, you got to have a real reason to do it.
You have to. Let's see. Anything else? One thing to note: if Teixeira does get a finish in this fight, he will have the record for the most finishes in the light heavyweight division history. I think that's something pretty cool, and I'm sure that he's trying to get. Even if he can't get the belt, I'd love to see that on his record, just to kind of round out his career.
Yeah, so I know I think I brought it up with Israel. I'm sorry, when Robert was fighting Jared. that if Robert won, Israel was going up to 205 to fight Young just because the fight didn't make sense for Robert so soon, and seems to be what's happening. It seemed like Israel's going to fight Young, and the winner of this is probably the number one contender maybe in the looming. Maybe gets Alexander Rakic for a number one.
Which you'd hate because before Israel Adesanya was moving up, this was supposed to be a number one contender fight, and it really sucks that this fight has now kind of lost some steam as far as that. And then not to mention, let's say Glover does win it. Okay, great. We got to wait for the Israel Adesanya fight to formulate, and then Glover Teixeira will get it after that. So he's going to be, 42, 43 whenever he comes into that fight?
And I bet they probably fight.
Right, right.
Yeah, so it is a tough fight for both these guys, and both these guys have a ton of question marks around it for me. I'd love to catch under 4.5 rounds or something. I don't know how much in favor that would be for us.
I bet it's like a minus 400 or
probably,
something.
but I know the Santos TKO probably wasn't too bad. And
it was like minus 135.
Maybe even hedging it with the Glover sub. I bet
Which
you
is
make
at
money.
plus 650.
I bet you make money either way, so make sure to keep an eye on the Twitter account because I think we got some good reads, and I think we're going to release some good picks, man. Looking to continue a third week in a row of just absolutely killing.
100%. You got a fighter to watch?
Yeah, so straight off the bat, no-brainer, man. Fighter to watch for me is Thiago Santos. I love this guy at light heavyweight. I think he has all the tools to be the champ. John's not in the division. He's finished the current champion at 205 right now, and with the 2 knee surgeries and stuff, he's without a doubt my fighter to watch. He's right back in running for the number one contender spot. I think they gave him a contender, where stylistically is a good fight for him.
I like that. My fighter to watch is Max Griffin. He needs this win. He really does. 2-5 in his last 7. He's on the borderline of getting cut, and I really do hope that he was serious whenever he said that he's really made some improvements whenever he hamstring and had to switch to southpaw. So as long as he comes in and shows me something that I haven't yet seen from Griffin, I think that his ceiling is higher than what it shows right here on his UFC record. So, but I really hope that he can get it done.
Yeah. So, fight to watch for me, man. Heinisch and Allen is close, man, but Darren Elkins is never in a fight that I don't want to watch. So, without a doubt, man, it's the second fight of the night. I know it's a little bit earlier, but Eduardo Garagorri and Darren Elkins are both guys that are going to bring it. And I imagine some blood to be spilled in that one.
I also like that. You're not going to have a fight with Darren Elkins. My fight to watch, which it's still kind of my fighter to watch, but DeMarcus, Rogerio, Lima, and Alexander Romanov. And I know that that's going to be just it's going to be a one-sided axe whooping, but I hope that Lima can take it for a little bit just so we get to see Romanov use his brute strength in there. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch just because he is kind of he hasn't really necessarily sharpened his tools, but just strength, size.
Physical attributes.
Yeah, man. It's hard not to just love. Yeah.
It is, man. So, we got a great night of fights, man. We got the return of Thiago Santos versus Glover Teixeira. So, official bets for the card will be released later in the week, probably around Thursday or Friday. Try to get them out as soon as possible so you guys can get the same lines. But I know we got a couple bets that we're really excited for. So, again, make sure you guys like the video. Comment below who you think is going to win the co-main event or the main event. So, one of you guys can get this poster. Anything you want to add?
No, I'm excited for this one. I do think that we see a little bit more decisions than we have in the past 2 cards.
We've been spoiled.
But
we have been spoiled, but at the same time, we're in a smaller octagon. Just produce some good finishes, so I'm hoping for another good week of fights, and hope you guys are making money with us.
Peace.